I think that's a thumbs up. Okay.
Yes, it is. It's 2 thumbs up.
Good morning and welcome to the Tompkins Intergovernmental Relations Committee. Today is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025, and it is 11:01. I'd like to welcome everyone to our committee meeting. I will say that we have decided to host this committee this year. We realize that there is definitely a lot of work for us, a lot of questions and uncertainty coming up in the upcoming year and probably for the next few years. So I definitely find value to this committee, and I just want to thank everyone for attending. I want to go quickly and announce the committee members, and then if we could also have just a super quick round of introductions so that we know who's part of this meeting today. Greg, can we start with you?
Yeah, hi, Greg Mezzi, member of the legislature, representing the western portion of Dryden, also vice chair of the legislature this year, and I do chair our Housing and Economic Development Committee as well.
Mike?
Mike Sigler, I am on Housing and Economic Development with Greg. I'm also on Public Safety, and I represent the town of Lansing.
My name is Shauna Black, and I am a legislator, have been for about 7.5 years now, and I will be the chair of this committee. Deborah?
And I'm Deborah Dawson, and I've worked with most of you back when Martha Robertson was running Tiger in its first iteration. It's lovely to see you all again, especially Amanda and Ryan. It's been too long, so thank you for coming.
Corsa? Like to introduce yourself?
Corsa Kunfi, County Administrator.
Okay. We do have Jennifer Tavares here in the chambers, who is the Director of Community Relations for Cornell. And Maury, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Maury Josephson, County Attorney.
Diane is next on our screen.
Hi, Diane Miller, Federal Relations for Cornell. And Deborah, I won't take it personally that you're not excited to see me.
Well, I am, Diane, but Ryan and Amanda have a special place in my heart.
I understand completely. Couldn't do my job without them.
Amy Kremenek.
Good morning, everyone. Amy Kremenek, Tompkins Cortland Community College.
Thank you. Amanda Spelsey.
Hi, good morning. Amanda Spellisey, Regional Director for Senator Schumer.
Ryan Gregoire.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you all. Ryan Gregoire, NISAC's Legislative Director.
And Norma and Bridget are our last two. There we go.
Norma Jane, Deputy County Administrator.
Hi, good morning. Bridget Nugent, the other Deputy County Administrator.
Okay, wonderful. We do have a section for public comment, and I noticed that there is one person here today in our waiting room. Amanda, do you have any public comment today?
I mean, I'm just curious to learn what you guys do.
Okay. Okay, sure. As far as some changes to the agenda, I did want to actually, we have slated Senator Schumer's office, a report from Amanda Spellisey, and I would like to move NISAC up right after that to talk a little bit about the New York State proposed budget, and then we can hear from Cornell and TC3. That's all right with everyone. Okay, so moving on to our chair's report. Again, I look forward to chairing this committee. Obviously, we're going to have a lot to do this year, and I want to remind all of my colleagues that the NISAC conference will be February 24th through the 26th. On Wednesday, I would like to schedule us to do some lobbying at the state capitol. So I'm going to reach out to all of our colleagues, see who is actually going to the NISAC conference, and then try and make some meetings with our state senators and our assembly people. So that email should be going out this afternoon. I'm also going to write an email to the legislators as well as our county administration so that we can actually get an idea on this committee what our priorities and goals will be as far as our lobbying efforts. I think it's going to be important to have very concentrated goals whenever we go out and lobby, and very directed asks. My assumption is that we're probably going to focus on some of our facilities this year. We have a center of government that we're working on. We're going to start probably working on our public safety building. As always, our airport is a concern. So my guess is that some of our asks might be based around those three projects.
Capital funding.
Capital funding, and also some of our uses of green energy, which it sounds like there's some money in our state budget that we could be going after. I also just wanted to, I did make a short speech last night about some of the things that we've seen over the past week that have really been concerning for some of our residents here in Tompkins County. That was some of the, I don't want to say guidance, but information that came out of the President's office January 28th. And it talked about essentially the withholding of some federal funds. Obviously, for many of us, we received phone calls from constituents that were concerned about really important programs that some of them go through our county agency, such as SNAP benefits, Medicaid. I had people call about financial aid, and I'm glad that we have Amanda Spellacy here as part of our committee to perhaps reflect and provide us with some insight on what's happening in Washington, D.C. So without further ado, Amanda Spellacy from Senator Schumer's office.
Thanks, Shauna. Hi, everybody, again. I'm sure there's probably a lot more questions than anybody has answers. And to be honest, I wasn't quite sure the format and the scope of what we were going to delve into here. So I don't really have a lot prepared, in part because I don't know that there's a lot concrete that I could share. So I will kind of just, I guess, touch on a very top level sort of state of play. And if it works for the committee members, it may be best to just maybe have some questions and answers so we can sort of target or focus in on what's of top concern or most interest.
Amanda, I'm sorry, just 1 second. I do want to remind everyone that this is an open meeting and that we are live on YouTube, and this will be archived on our Tompkins County YouTube page, just for clarity.
So there certainly is a lot going on at the federal level, as there is in all communities, and obviously there are, sort of regular order type things that have to happen throughout the course of a governmental year and cycle. Probably most routine, I guess, and I use that term a little loosely, but we do have a continuing resolution in force, which is funding the government, and that takes us to March 14th. At that time, in the absence of either a full fiscal year budget, a full fiscal year continuing resolution is an option, I suppose, or another short-term budget resolution. The government does face, and I'm certainly not saying this is certain or is happening. If I could predict a lot of things, I'd probably be buying lottery tickets for all of us because I know the numbers. But we will face the government running out of money. And then procedures begin to be implemented to deal with shutdowns if and when we get to that point. At the same time, as I'm sure you're tracking, there is discussions from the majority leadership in both the House and Senate to work on some budget reconciliation directives and procedures to address some of the fiscal related measures that fall under sort of that broader guise that can be done in a more expedient fashion and in absence of a 60 vote requirement to pass legislation. But obviously we need to fund the government. At the same time, there's a lot of questions and concerns and confusion about what is currently happening, what is happening with respect to funding. We saw that last week when the OMB issued a directive that was interpreted to freeze and halt all dissemination of payments that I will note were previously approved and enshrined in law by the legislative branch of Congress, who has the power of the purse, to direct funding to agencies, nonprofit equities. The list of impacted parties runs the gamut. That was, feels like it was years, but I think it was just 36 hours that was enforced till that was paused. But there still is a lot of question and lack of clarity in terms of what that encompasses, what was paused, what is maybe not 100% being paused, and certainly, bureaucrats tasked with disseminating those funds are mindful of wanting to be in compliance with whatever directives they have. You probably have seen, and if not, I can share or direct you to the senator's various floor statements every day when the Congress comes into session. He delivers some remarks which are sort of a reaction, state of play, update on sort of the actions of the day, so to speak. And he was very forceful and very concerned. And I spoke with many of you about what that kind of freeze meant to your ability to deliver services to your constituencies, whether it was Head Start, whether it was veteran services, it was research for children who are participating in trials to deal with cancer. There's all kinds of things. We heard loud and clear how detrimental and crippling and concerning that was, and so that has been paused. I guess we shall see if that is resumed or what will be. With that, we also at the federal level are working through establishing the president's cabinet. Those nominations, the nominees have gone through hearings in the various committees of jurisdiction. Many of them have been voted out of committee and are going and proceeding to the Senate floor for votes. We have seen that the cabinet begin to be populated, and there are some more that are coming today. Let's see. I think that kind of covers the state of play for the last week and a half. Are there questions or other things maybe I can expound on? I mean, I want to be, and I'm in an official capacity, so obviously I only can speak to those things that fall under that job responsibility and obligation, but one of them is certainly sharing information with our stakeholders and constituents, so I'm happy to do that.
Thank you so much. I have Deborah Dawson with a question.
Yeah, this is less of a question, Amanda, but a plea. Watching these executive orders that are coming out, watching the executive branch try to impound funds that Congress has appropriated, as a retired federal employee, watching Elon Musk and his minions take over the databases and the payment systems upon which I depend, and having access to my personal information. The perception that I have and that I see on social media and talking to like-minded individuals here in Tompkins County, we just don't see Congress really stepping up and trying to stop what is, in many cases, illegal actions on the part of Musk and the president and his appointees. So I'm hoping that I see more action, more resistance, more standing up and saying, hell no, we're not going to let Elon Musk arrogate our constitutionally allotted powers. So I don't mean to have this sound like a criticism. I'm just begging leadership in the Senate and Congress to step up and correct this. So thanks for listening.
Thank you, Deborah, for your comments. Certainly in the hat that I wear, I first and foremost am a conduit to share feedback and concerns that we receive throughout the state with the senator, and I will certainly do that. There are, obviously I am here in an official capacity, so there are appropriate limitations to sort of the
What you
the
can
lanes that
say.
I a stickler for that. The senator has been very clear in terms of his concern, and that's probably an understatement word to use, but I will use it as what it was playing out, and has been very vocal in his commentary and will continue to do so. I guess I would say that there are defined lanes and jurisdictions that each branch of government has. And in terms of sort of the law enforcement arm of that is not a direct lane that falls under the legislative powers of the Senate and Congress. Certainly, we will continue to call for action and to continue to spotlight the concerns and the real, I'm struggling to have a appropriate professional words, but we will continue to spotlight and to do what we can. I can speak about actions and things that have been taken. Senator Schumer and Jeffries have introduced or plan to introduce legislation that will implement some safeguards to protect the rating of Treasury's information. And that branch, they have called upon, whether in protest or doing what we can to put the spotlight on it. But a lot of this, and I'm not allowed to give legal advice, but certainly a lot of this falls under the arms of the Department of Justice. And the Department of Justice falls under, to a certain extent, the purview of the executive branch. So we are certainly in an interesting spot, to say the least. But I will say without question that the senator shares your concerns, your grave concerns, and is continuing to sound the alarms on how dire the circumstances in this precedent are. And you will hear him later today speak about some of the parallels that have happened, or could happen, I should say, with the access to information that is purportedly being gained and what has happened with OMB and their attempts to freeze the dissemination of payments. If you imagine for a moment, if Treasury was suddenly paused and unable to send payments to veterans who bravely served and honorably served our country but could no longer receive those benefits. If someone's disability payments were halted, Social Security checks frozen. These are real life Americans who have served our country, contributed to our country, who their private information and in many cases their access to resources to help support their living and their living standards are potentially could be compromised. And so it is very real and very concerning.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we are also joined by Zoe and Charlie from Cornell University. Hello. Charlie, it looks like you're getting your steps in there.
Every day.
Okay, next I have Mike Sigler.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Mike.
I just wanted to ask you just a couple of things. The senator's always been very supportive of our airport. Obviously, we want to keep that on the radar as we're looking for more routes, as many as possible. The Washington route has been great, and I think that's going to work out terrific for us. Obviously, we're looking for other hubs, though, to fly into as opposed to Newark and Philadelphia. We're always looking for better options. So anything the senator can do to help us with that. He's also been very helpful with funding, and I know that's going to be more difficult maybe going forward, but Ithaca has obviously this floodplain map that is very troubling for about 850 homes that are going to now have to buy flood insurance. So anything you can do to help us with that. My question is about earmarking. Do you foresee that going forward into the future, or do you think that's going to end with the new Congress?
So I'll take it one by one. The airport, yes, obviously we have a long history of supporting the airport, helping expand service, supporting growth of the facilities, and I have more recently been in conversation with some of the challenges that exist there. Very happy to see the United flight came back. That was something that 2-3 years ago, I think, right? Feels like it was like many, many years ago, but that was paused. And we actually had conversations on behalf of Ithaca with United. And at that time, they assured us that it was not off the table entirely, and they heard us, and it would stay in the hopper as sort of the aviation industry kind of recovered the pandemic. So we're very happy to see that it did indeed. And hopefully that'll be of use and supportive to those who use it, so that they'll use it so we don't lose it. All ears and all open to conversations about other opportunities that the airport is looking at. Roxana and I have talked a little bit, but I certainly would encourage any of you who are part of any advisory committees, please just keep us posted. I can't help what, I don't know. So, if you get a read on somebody being interested, or there's a reason to kind of pursue a certain route or whatever it may be, let's talk, because we certainly can reach out and be supportive of those requests, and we'll do that. And that's an unlimited, we're not a bank that you're going to draw down on that, right? We want to see you all succeed and to support the needs that exist there. The next one was, you touched on the flooding. Yes, I'm very aware of some of the challenges there. We had supported the city with a congressionally directed spending to try to offset, and I don't want to wade too much into the nitty gritty of something that I am not the hydrologist and expert in, but to try to help support some of the mitigation measures that they would try to potentially undertake to reduce, I think, as I understand it, the number of entities that might find themselves in the flood zone. For a variety of reasons, that earmark was not, I think it is in the process of being returned to Treasury because it didn't comport with some of the other funding sources that they were trying to pull together. But regardless of that, our climate is changing. We know that we are seeing the intensity of storms and the subsequent aftermath and the disasters. And, we are going to continue to have these conversations. So I'm all ears in ways that we can be supportive of communities. I know that, the flood insurance program has its challenges. It is already heavily subsidized by the federal government to try to help defray some of the costs. But certainly I'm aware that particularly in some of the communities that are being included in these remapping and these risk zones that would require flood insurance, that is an incredibly challenging cost to bear. So, we welcome the feedback, and we'll continue to talk through, ideas and ways that we can be helpful. And then in a broader context with earmarks, I don't have any real information to report out on it. Obviously, we are, I think we just did we're trying to do the fourth fiscal year that we've had them. When the congressionally directed spending came back with some modifications to how they used to be. Senator Schumer has been incredibly supportive of that process. We're proud of the resources that we're able to bring to communities, and proud of the benefit and certainly uplift the impacts that they have had on communities. I think that, there is some new leadership, obviously, the sort of four corners, if you will, that exist. And so we will see what their posture is on that. So I guess stay tuned.
Thank you.
Great. Deborah Dawson?
Yeah, sorry, I've got one actually specific question, Amanda. I don't know if you've seen the order that the new director of the Department of Transportation issued. It includes a statement that to the maximum extent permitted by law, DOT supported or assisted programs and funding shall prioritize projects and goals that, one, give preference to communities with marriage and birth rates higher than the national average, prohibit recipients of DOT support or assistance from imposing vaccine and mask mandates, and finally, require local compliance or cooperation with federal immigration enforcement and with other goals and objectives specified by the President of the United States. This is a matter of concern to us because, as you're probably aware, our TCAT is a not-for-profit organization and therefore not eligible to be a direct recipient of DOT. Right. Yeah, and we are a so-called sanctuary jurisdiction.
And the county is is the grantee.
Is the recipient, and then TCAT and GATAbout are the sub-recipients. So yes. We have to be concerned about whether they're going to cut our funding. And without our funding, TCAT's dead in the water. Mm-hmm.
I would say that broadly, I'll go back to the OMB's pause on the dissemination of federal funds. I think one of the most compelling cases or tacts that Senator Schumer helped lead was how to localize and contextualize the impacts of a directive and an action like that. And so stakeholders across our state were very vocal and clear on what the impacts of things like that could be, and it helped elucidate just how troubling and flawed and fill in the blank, however you want, a maneuver like that was. I don't have an answer for you specifically to this new directive coming from the Federal Department of Transportation, but it will be critically important to stay in communication about what those kinds of things could mean and how those impacts could cripple or hinder your ability to serve your constituency and to meet all of the expectations that those living in Tompkins County or anyone reasonable in a community has from their county government. So the best thing that you can do is keep us apprised of what that could look like, so that we have that information to share widely and broadly if that becomes a necessity.
Well, that federal assistance is over half of TCAT's budget, so that's the operating budget, and then all of our capital expenditures are basically funded through federal and state grants.
And I think things that to take that into to become more granular, what's your ridership? Think about, and obviously not today, we don't do this, but how many individuals utilize those services? Where are that services bringing individuals? Is it bringing in the workforce to some of the major employers in the community, because a lot of that workforce can't afford or doesn't live in the city center or wherever they may be? Is it bringing people to critical services to ensure that they have a quality of life or actual life, if it's for medical services? Is it helping bring educators to schools where they're helping nurture our next generations, whatever it may be? Those are the kinds of things that will be helpful for us to really localize and personalize the impacts that things like that could have.
It would have a huge impact on the Cornell community, just for the benefit of Diane and Charlie.
All the above, though.
Yeah, and all of the above as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for joining us. You're certainly welcome to stay for the remainder of our meeting.
I would love to. I have quite a few commitments that I have to attend to, so I will beg out today. But as I had said when we talked, I'd be happy to come back. And I think, as we get a little bit more, is May the next meeting? Am I remembering that,
yes,
or do you have one sooner? As we get a little bit more into the process and the new administration, where we have a better read on kind of what objectives are and where things are going, I will probably have more specifics that I can report out on. So I'll be glad to come back to.
Great. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you, everyone. Nice to see you.
Take care.
Thank you, Amanda.
Okay, next we have Ryan Gregoire from NISAC. And Ryan, I attended the budget presentation yesterday. That was a nice overview of the state budget. And while I understand we probably don't have an hour and a half to go over that, it would be wonderful if you could give us the Cliff Notes version.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Black, and good to see everyone. There's a lot of material that I'm going to try and cover, so please, if I go too fast, stop me, and I'm more than happy, of course, to follow up with additional details. First thing I want to do is point everyone to the NISAC website, nisac.org/budget. That's going to be the landing page for all of the information, including the slide deck that I'm going to share with Zoom here, if it allows me. Okay. Everyone can see my screen here, the seals of the 62 counties.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. So let me also start off, before I get into this, I do want to take one moment to talk about short-term rentals in the short-term registry law that was signed by the governor pending a chapter amendment, which is now moving its way through the state legislature. We are going to be launching a webpage on our website either today or sometime this week. That will be a one-stop shop for all information on the short-term rental law. We've also engaged with a private sector partner who we have vetted, as well as many other association of counties across the state, or across the country rather, to help counties with registry compliance, tax compliance, tax collection and remittance, and local code enforcement. So we'll be talking with them a little bit more at the NISAC conference if you're able to attend. That would be a good point of contact to take a look at, just to help with the overall administration, if that's something that Tompkins County is interested in. So I guess really to start off and to piggyback off of what Amanda was talking about, again, there's the link, nisac.org/budget. I want to talk briefly about our concerns with what's happening in Washington, D.C. So as you all probably recall, under the former Trump administration, Congress and the president had enacted the TCJA, which is the sweeping tax reform legislation. That is up for renewal again. There was a sunset clause, and that's really what's at the crux of being negotiated on reconciliation. The big concern for us is this 5th bullet, cutting mandatory and discretionary spending by up to $2.5 trillion over 10 years. What does that mean to New York State? Well, as you all know, because counties pay $8.5 billion a year to New York State for the Medicaid program, Medicaid is the one single largest program that keeps me up at night. It scares the death out of me because if the federal government changes to a block grant formula, if they reduce the 50% federal match floor, or if they start prohibiting certain actions and certain eligibility criteria and standards for Medicaid recipients, that all is going to fall on the state. And we know that the state does not have the capacity to swallow a $60 billion federal share of the Medicaid program. And in turn, what I'm worried about is that snowball rolling down the hill and ending up in the laps of the county. So I think one critical piece, and something I've shared with everyone on yesterday's call, and certainly Stephen Aquario and Dave Lucas from our office echoed this as well, we need to be reminding the entire congressional delegation, regardless of politics, right, the potential impact on New York State and, more importantly, counties and communities, local communities, on what some of these cuts may mean to us. Now, we're calling it the SALT cap on Medicaid. And why I bring that up is because there are some states in this country, based on the Medicaid share formula, that receive 70, 80, 90% reimbursement on their Medicaid spend from the federal government. New York State and 10 other states have a floor at 50%. So for every dollar that New York State spends on Medicaid, the feds reimburse us 50%, and then we as counties are responsible for $8.5 billion of the state share, of the non-federal share. On January 21st, Governor Hochul proposed her state fiscal year 2026 executive budget, $252 billion spending plan. It's an increase of $14 billion, or roughly 6%. You see the largest increases there, Medicaid, capital projects, and agency operations. And they are projecting a federal aid decrease, and that's primarily attributed to the loss of the enhanced federal Medicaid match. If you remember, Senator Schumer and the congressional delegation back in 2017, in a bipartisan piece of legislation that was signed by President Trump, enacted a temporary increase, a 6.2% increase in EFMAP funding. So that brought our floor from 50 to 56.2%. That was worth billions and billions of dollars in benefit to counties, as well as the state of New York. Well, that money has since run its course, and the state is seeing a decline here. in federal operating assistance. I'm not going to go through this slide in detail, but this shows a little bit about where some new funding is going to be coming for counties. I'll caution everyone on this $56 million for 18B reimbursement rates for assigned counsel program. That is just an appropriation to keep in compliance with the state's share of the increased assigned counsel rate reimbursement to counties. So it's not like it is new money, but it's just keeping the status quo along. It's not like we're getting this huge burden relieved off of our backs, per se. This is really critical, though. This is something that we fought really hard for on aging services. I am sure, because every county's in this boat, that Tompkins County has a massive wait list for unmet need for older American services. If you think about that, that's PC1, PC2, that's personal care services for residents, home delivered meals, congregate meals, right? The governor's allocating $45 million to address the unmet need. We worked really hard over the summer with our partners at the county offices for aging. They developed this matrix that showed what the unmet need is, and the governor, to her credit, is going to be closing that gap. And this funding will close that gap so we can provide all of our older Americans with the services that they qualify for. Agriculture and markets, $53.4 million. That's a decrease from the enacted budget. However, that's typically how the executive budget plays out. That's probably going to be restored by what's called legislative ads in this next month of negotiations. Community colleges. I know we have Tompkins County Community College on with us. There is some good news here, actually some great news for community colleges. The governor maintains the funding floor at 100% again of last year's funding. Without that funding floor, community colleges would be faced with hundreds of millions of dollars in shortfall of revenue, which inevitably would put a significant burden on their operations and on the operations and the funding that counties provide as well, both through out-of-county community college chargebacks and sponsor contributions for home schools. The governor is also proposing a free community college in high demand occupations, and there's a list of those occupations in the budget. The good news for counties is the state is going to actually commit 100% of that funding. So you, as Tompkins County, will not be required to do your 1/3 match for tuition for those students. This is a great program. It's a really cool initiative. It's going to pump students into community colleges, but it's also going to help target specific jobs and individuals that are going after their associate's degrees in jobs that are needed. Micron, advanced manufacturing, engineering, social work. There's a huge lack of social work providers, mental health. They're all listed in the governor's budget. We heard a lot of positive feedback with the legislature yesterday. We testified before them in the afternoon, and there's a lot of support, bipartisan support on this proposal. Downtown revitalization. I want to bring this up to everyone, and counties are not eligible for DRI grants. However, the governor, at our request, is making a little bit of a flexibility in the DRI initiative. There's about $1 billion in unspent funds in that program. We've asked the administration for counties that are impacted by closures of state correctional facilities or juvenile justice facilities. Counties should be able to apply for, if they have an economic development revitalization kind of roadmap, those counties should be allowed to apply for a portion of these funds to offset the negative impact of the closure of those facilities. Really happy to see the governor included that in her budget. Another $2.45 million for tourism. That's level funding from last year. Elections. Real quick on this. The governor has appropriated another $5 million to reimburse for absentee ballot mailing. However, there's no money in the executive's budget for operating assistance or capital reimbursement for election administration. We've written to the governor's office, we've written to the state legislature and asked for a $15 million operating appropriation for counties and a $50 million capital appropriation for counties for election equipment. Fingers crossed, we're hopeful that something will come through. I don't anticipate the state will allocate that kind of level of funding, but in the past, the state legislature has added money to the budget for counties for both operating and capital. Environment, another $500 million for clean water infrastructure. Again, bipartisan support. This is really important. We heard a lot about this across the state from your county planning departments and environmental health units. There's also $1 billion in funding for new capital projects for climate mitigation and adaptation projects. However, counties are not part of this advisory group with DEC to determine where those dollars should be spent. So we have written to the governor asking that we as counties have a seat at the table, because you all know at the local level what's most important, and we should be able to help direct some of those funds. Okay, this is the most important program that I think you should all meet with Dr. Kellis about, and Senator Webb about, and your other majority and minority members in the state legislature. County Infrastructure Grants Program, the County Partnerships Program. $50 million last year, brand new program, extremely flexible funding. It's basically county aid to municipalities, if you think of it that way. There is an incentive for counties to advance projects to develop supportive housing, market rate housing, affordable housing for their residents. There's a larger grant allocation for communities that do that. We are trying to get that pot of money increased to $100 million because frankly, $50 million when you spread it across 57 counties outside of New York City doesn't go very far. I mean, it's great. It's a great first step in an investment, but we need more. And counties know exactly where housing is needed. They know exactly where economic development is needed, whether it's sewer, water, wastewater, electricity, broadband, you name it. This program is very flexible, and the grant process is extremely easy when compared to other state agencies. So I would encourage you to bring this up to Anna Kellis and to Senator Webb. NISAC has written a letter for lawmakers. Billy Jones, who is the chair of the Local Governments Committee in the Assembly, Anna knows him very well, and Monica Martinez, who is the chair of the Senate Local Governments Committee. Senator Webb knows her very well. They are circulating what's called a budget sign-on letter to get support from their colleagues to increase this funding to $100 million. So the local government chairs are pushing this on behalf of all of you, but we need as much support as possible because, as you all know, there are a lot of interest groups. There's a lot of folks who are looking for state financial assistance. There's initiative in the governor's budget to expand the JSOC. And with that, there's also going to be a requirement on counties that if a cyber incident occurs, they need to report that to state dishes within 48 hours. So that is now going to be a mandate on counties. Honestly, from what I've heard from Corsa's colleagues across the state is They're doing it already. I mean, if there's a cyber incident, basically the first phone call is to dishes to say, help us figure out what's going on here. So it's a new mandate, but it's not, it's not going to be any strenuous lift because it's already happening. And the other opportunity that we worked with DASNY, the Dormitory Authority of State of New York, is they are now going to have the ability and flexibility to help counties with construction management services. Home buyer tax exemption, there's a real property tax exemption, local option for home buyers. We'll see if that is included in the enacted budget. I'm guessing it probably will be. Or the legislature may want to pass this as a standalone outside the budget. And there's a little bit more money for a year-round youth employment program. So not just summer youth employment, but to expand it to be more inclusive year-round. Medicaid, the governor's budget does not anticipate a decline in federal revenue. Why do I bring that up? Because, again, $71 billion comes to the state of New York for Medicaid. If they lower that floor to, you name the percentage, for every percent decline in the floor, that value is about a little over $1 billion to New York State. So if it goes from 50 to 45, it's around $7 billion. So you can imagine the enormous financial pressure that the state and the counties will be under on the Medicaid program. The budget as presented does maintain our Medicaid cap. And they project that without the cap, counties would be spending an additional $8.3 billion. Just for the public's awareness, if I may, Chair Black, I want folks to understand that we are the only state in the country that requires counties to pay a portion of the state's share for the Medicaid program. Again, we are the only state in the country that requires unrestricted check. Tompkins County has to send a weekly check to New York State to help pay for the Medicaid program. I just want folks to be cognizant of that. This is some good news in the state budget. There's an additional $16.5 million for assisted outpatient treatment programs, AOT programs. This is a mandated program for counties, but the state is recognizing that costs are increasing and that it's good to get people into treatment for mental health and substance abuse. And they're increasing some funding there for us, which is, again, this is great news. EMS, I've been asked by the NISAC Board of Directors, which Chair Black is a wonderful member of our board. I've been asked to talk to all of you about emergency medical services. And at the conclusion, I would love to hear some feedback from you all. There is a proposal in the governor's budget to require and deem EMS as an essential service. And with that, there is language that states cities, towns, villages, counties shall be required to provide EMS. It doesn't distinguish which tier of government is responsible. It just says all local governments are responsible for providing EMS. There's a little bit of a turf war, I guess, you could say, between other units of local governments and counties. We are trying to figure out how best to support our EMS services without placing any new mandate on local governments. Because we know, in talking with everyone across the state, every EMS model is incredibly different and the system is incredibly diverse. Whether you're in Buffalo, Central New York, the Southern Tier, the North Country, it's radically different. So to try and fit everyone in a square box is incredibly difficult. Actually, it's impossible, to be honest with you. So we're trying to figure out, where do counties fit in with our other local government partners? And how do we structure a system that supports EMS without financially burdening one unit of government versus another?
Ryan, can I
Oh, yeah.
just say, I believe our friends at Cornell, some of them might have to leave the meeting, and wanted to just see if they had any questions for you before they had to depart.
Sure.
No.
I will do a little shout out to Cornell, if I may. They're going to be presenting at our conference, the legislative conference, on the childcare crisis. Kathy Creighton, who is the director of the Buffalo CoLab for Cornell, will be with us. So thank you to our partners at Cornell.
Great. Okay.
Real quick on public safety, we're almost done here. I want to note for everyone that there was an $85 million appropriation in last year's budget for implementation of E911. That's the ability to do video calls, text calls to 911 dispatch. To do this statewide, the estimate is somewhere around $6 to $7 billion. So $85 million is a small amount of money, but it's, it's starting to get the process going. Despite having a commitment from the state that they wanted to continue this in the future, this year's budget does not include any new funding for E911 implementation. So, I'm not sure how we're supposed to progress down this path when the fiscal is so extreme without a concrete statewide plan and a concrete funding for it. So I flagged that for all of you. Your 911 dispatchers are very well aware of this. Emergency management knows about this issue. We're trying to advocate to the legislature to get this money back in the enacted budget. Raise the age. Here's something also to be aware of. The budget includes another $250 million for Raise the Age, bringing the total money available to counties to $1.235 billion. That includes both reimbursement for program cost and also detention of youth, eligible Raise the Age youth. There's a lot of money out there. In defense of the counties on this front, the state agencies have been incredibly arduous and difficult to work with. So, this needs to be a partnership to implement Raise the Age, and the state needs to work with counties in doing that. And whether that is simplifying the application, and if you speak with your probation and DSS directors, you will hear how difficult it is to submit these plans and get approved by the state of New York. Frankly, it's a bit ridiculous. There's a lot of reforms that could take place to make that process simpler. And we should be looking at detention capacity. There is no facility anywhere near Tompkins County. You have to go all the way to Onondaga if you're lucky to put a youth in a facility. So we're looking for some flexibility there. We're looking for the state to be a partner in helping to bring more beds online. Lastly, to mention here, highway funding. There's a little bit more money in CHIPS. Everything else is flatlined. We are advocating with your county highway superintendent association to increase the CHIPS bidding threshold from $350,000 to $1 million to allow more work to be done in-house. And we're asking for an additional $250 million in CHIPS, and that is just to maintain level service of paving and repaving our roads from 2020 levels. That's just to maintain the status quo. That's how much more expensive materials and raw materials have become for paving. So I will stop there. I know I did a quick federal, I did a quick short-term rental plug, and now I've gone over the budget. I flooded you all with a ton of information. I'm happy to talk about this and anything else that might be on your minds.
Great. Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah.
I saw a hand from Greg.
Yeah, Ryan, Greg Mezzi here. Thank you again. I'm always so impressed at the level of detail in which NISAC can get this information out and how quickly they bring it in, how clear they bring it to us. So thank you, and please share that with your colleagues. I know it takes a village. I have two questions, or maybe a question and a comment. On the Medicaid front, the federal allocation to the state, is that done across all of the states, or is there opportunity for the federal government to play with New York State's allocation differently than maybe Ohio or New Hampshire or Florida or Wyoming?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there is right now, as we speak, there is a standard formula that every state receives, and it's a very complex formula. Dave Lucas, who's kind of our Medicaid guru, helped design it when he worked down in Washington, but it's a very complex formula. But basically, a large indicator is the household family income. It is a big indicator on the way the formula plays out. So New York State has a 50% match, but a state like Mississippi, who has a very low household family income, has a very high federal match. It's like 87% or something like that. Don't quote me on that exact number, but it's very high. Congress could do all sorts of things, some of which include they could lower that bottom floor to say 45%, or some other lower threshold. And it's funny because if you run the states through the equation, New York State would, if we didn't have that minimum floor of 50%, we would only be getting reimbursed at 33% from the feds right now. So they could just flip the switch and say, look, there's not going to be a minimum floor. We're just going to go by what the formula spits out. And that would have a disastrous negative impact on the state of New York, as well as 10 other states.
Thank you. That clarity is helpful. And then also just a comment, designating EMS as an essential service, I think is a great effort, and anything we can do to make sure that there's resources available for counties to work collaboratively with, the local municipalities to further study how this would work, or the integration of public-private partnerships, or how we can address this issue collectively. I know is a focus area for many of our town supervisors, and I think a few legislators around the table trying to figure out, how we continue to deliver EMS service throughout the county.
Greg, would there be interest in Tompkins County for the ability, and I'm just brainstorming, you don't even have to answer this right on the spot, but just something for folks to think about. The way the legislation is drafted, it allows counties and other units of local government to create joint taxing districts, almost like it would be an enterprise fund essentially within the county budget. So let's say Dresden and Ithaca and Lansing all want to get together and do some combined EMS system. If the counties and or those municipalities had the flexibility to create a special district for that tax, is that something of interest to the county? Just something to think about.
I don't speak on behalf of the entire county. I'm seeing a few of my colleagues nod their heads that there'd be.
There's been talk
and interest
about a countywide ambulance district.
Yeah, and I think too, it's as we look at our local partners who already have well-established, ambulance services, and others that not, so the ability to sort of carve and make up those districts would probably be helpful and worth a consideration in Tompkins.
Yeah, because one thing I'm trying to do at the state is to say, look, in some towns, in some villages, in some fire districts have really robust, good service delivery. And in some areas of the state, they have a really good private sector partner that's doing a great job. In a lot of areas, there's a huge gap in coverage, or volunteers are leaving and they need to supplement them with paid. There's some mixture of all of the above in every county, and it's incredibly different in every single county. So what I'm trying to tell the state is give us the tools at the local level to figure out what that looks like.
Yeah, my last comment on this is, currently my district in Dryden, Dryden Ambulance, about 40% of their calls is outside of their sort of service district in Dryden, right? So they're already subsidizing other parts of the community to no real benefit to the folks in Dryden. So, it definitely, there's a need.
Thank you.
So I just want to have a time check. It is noon. We're an hour into our meeting, and my apologies for not letting everyone know that these typically go around 2 hours. Wanted to see if there are any other questions or comments for Ryan.
I had an issue I'd like to raise with Ryan, but is he going to stick around? Because I really don't want to, delay the Cornell people any more than they've already been
Or
doing.
we could do a call with Ryan afterwards.
Yeah.
If that would be all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, Deborah.
The other thing I just wanted to point out, Ryan, I went to your presentation yesterday, and the one thing that was mentioned was that as far as casino revenue, that there are some New York City casinos that are opening up, which could mean that we will see less casino tax revenue. I think we receive here in our county about $1 million every year from 2 casinos locally. So we could definitely see a decrease in that.
Yeah, there is consideration at the state level right now to grant 1 or more licenses to a commercial casino operator in the New York City metropolitan area. Certainly that would just naturally take away from folks who may be traveling to other regional casinos. We are looking at exploring an opportunity to do some kind of negatively impacted fund per se, to put in the budget basically to hold harmless fund for any area that's negatively impacted by a loss in revenue, that the state would backfill that and maintain that loss, that gap. So we're looking at that. We've talked to the budget director about this. And it's something that, the governor has before her to consider.
Great. Thank you so much. Okay, next we have Cornell University, and we have Diane and Charlie, and Jennifer is here in chamber with us. Welcome, and thank you for coming to our meeting today.
And for being patient.
Happy to be here, and I understand why you wanted to hear from Ryan before you wanted to hear from me, because everything he was talking about affects everything that you do. But at Cornell, we want to be a good neighbor, a good constituent, a good contributing member of the community. And so I'm just going to focus a little bit on the executive orders, the avalanche of executive orders that have come out of the new Trump administration and what it might mean for Cornell. And at this point, the ones that we've identified that are going to have the most immediate impact on the operations of Cornell are the ones that change the federal policy with regard to DEI for federal contractors. Anything that deals with immigration in terms of enforcement and all of that, and then the order targeting anti-Semitism on college campuses, and then to a lesser extent, we're still waiting for things to come out on transgender athletes and perhaps eliminating the Department of Education. We'll say just right at the outset, most of these orders, the way that they're written, they're directions to the agencies to provide additional guidance and policies, and they give them a range of times to provide that guidance back, 30, 60, 90, 120 days. And so until we know how the agencies are going to implement these policies, we're sort of, kind of scrambling to figure out exactly what they mean. So there's a group at Cornell, I think it's called the risk planning group, where we're trying to, again, assess information that comes out daily from our funding agencies and sort of figure out how that flows into our programming. And in the immediate term, we've only gotten a handful. After the memo from the Office of Management and Budget freezing. That was a shock to all of us, and then the immediate rescission was sort of good news in the interim. In the sort of immediate term, we've only gotten a handful of stop work orders, mostly on USAID grants. And as that agency's sort of future is hanging in the balance, I will say that Cornell received, faculty received last year $10 million in funding for various grants from that agency. And so those are the ones that are the subject of the stop work orders. We know that our funding agencies, National Science Foundation, National Institute of Health, are reviewing our the current grants to kind of going through them line by line to see where they comply with these executive orders. And again, as the administration is figuring out how they're going to implement them, we're again waiting that guidance and ready to sort of adapt as necessary. But I mean, when you think about the amount of federal grant funding that comes into Cornell University, the potential impact is very wide-ranging and sort of not completely understood yet. But again, something that we're taking very seriously. Now, with the immigration orders, so far, other than some sort of the action that would target protests on campus or seem to target protests on campus, they have not been aimed at student visas. And so again, waiting for these policies to shake out before we know what that means for our students, our faculties, or our international community. And I think that's sort of the quick summary, but of where we're at. But again, something that we are paying very close attention to and working very hard on making sure is implemented in the least disruptive way that we can, but know that it's going to be a lot more to come.
Thank you, Diane. And I know that our community is certainly feeling it. Many of my constituents are professors or work at Cornell or grad students. And so I think there's definitely feelings that our community, we're feeling stretched right now. And we know that something is coming down, but we just don't know what it is. And I think that's the most horrifying part. I know that there were conversations within my circle of friends talking about the travel ban and how that could really have an impact on Cornell and obviously our community. If a third of your students or 28% of your students are international, not having them here could really have impacts on Tompkins and of course Cornell.
Yeah, absolutely disruptive. And so, I mean, that's one of the policies where the agencies have been directed to make this review of enhanced vetting procedures, and those reviews and recommendations are supposed to come back within a 60-day time period. So again, waiting to see what that impact is. I noticed just yesterday the administration put out a national security alert or national security memo with regard to Iran. Doesn't target students, but it does tell the Secretary of State to try and isolate the country internationally. We have Iranian students at Cornell. And so what does that mean for them? We don't know yet. But again, it's all taken into account in our planning. So we put together some internal resources for Cornell students, faculty, staff, where we try to keep it updated in real time as we get more information. Again, trying to serve as a resource. And so there are, it doesn't feel like a satisfactory answer, but again, we're working with incomplete information at this point and don't want to alarm anybody necessarily, but want everybody to know that we're not just sitting back and letting this happen, but we're trying to proactively plan for worst case scenarios and all of that.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments from anyone else? Okay.
Charlie,
Howdy.
Charlie, would you like to give an update as well?
Yeah, could I?
Yeah.
Happy to. So Albany, we are just maybe very generally, and I'll get really specific. In general, Ryan did an overall great job of the overlay. He had a potential $6 billion, let's say, hole in the budget. Now, the New York State budget is starting out pretty healthy. Tax revenues are up. Business activity has been up. And so we're starting from a sort of a strong position, frankly. So there's really no forecast that the budget will go into crisis like it has maybe 3 or 4 times in the last 30 years. And so now, again, let me add that. So he had a $6 billion. Other people are saying that the problem that the DC could cause, it could be a 10 or a little more than billion. But again, that's not in itself a one-time reduction of that money. That's not a long duration economic collapse like we've actually had before. So that is my greatest fear, actually, for the counties, is that the economy would, as a result of federal actions or international, who knows, my greatest fear is that the overall economy takes a prolonged downturn. That's when New York State revenues suffer the most. So having said that, and hoping that doesn't happen, a few specifics. Ryan did a great job. One little very, just some things that are just worth mentioning. Like he said, the importance of water infrastructure for counties. They're working on, so the WIA grants, like he said, the governor's budget, $500 million, great level. I'm going to mention that agency is in the midst of updating their regulations to award more scoring points for sustainability, cybersecurity, for some of these modern things that good public infrastructure should be incorporating. They updating the regs. I think they're in public comment period right now. But updating it, and a place like Tompkins County will benefit from those scoring point changes. So it's not just completion dates, what kind of infrastructure. It's actually climate resilience, cybersecurity, and other more modern things that I'm sure Tompkins County cares about. So that's a good thing with the WIA grants. And then another one is, I don't know if he mentioned this, really interesting, this governor, tell me if I missed this in your presentation, I forget the acronym. She has a new fund of money that would be used for large, let's say, centralized sites to be developed for clean energy production. Now, I don't think they even have any in mind. They copied this from the state of Texas. But it's something that, again, in Tompkins County, I don't know if it would be applicable, but a sort of we're going to need more clean energy. And the thinking is that I think they're just thinking, let's attract some ideas. Let's set it up so that if there was a proposal, we would have a fund of money to spend on this kind of site development. Just thought I'd mention it, that it's worth mentioning. Also, land acquisition and conservation, real quick. They have some proposals in the governor's budget that would accelerate and make it easier to protect open space. Quicker title searches. The state is still committed to, I think it's 30 by 30 or something like that. Some protecting a certain amount of land by a certain date. A few things that Cornell is working on that are relevant, I think. There's an outbreak of avian influenza. Our diagnostic lab does all the work for the state of New York in animal testing, works very closely with the federal government and, of course, the state government. So we're all over that. We are asking for, probably going to receive more money to do that testing. There's a lot more testing going on because of the outbreaks across the state, and it's expected to get worse. That's why the price of eggs is up so much, because in other states there have been many farms affected, and the supply has been affected. Talking about labor briefing and
yes.
So on, I think, January 21st, folks from our labor school faculty and outreach staff did a briefing for the labor chairs and staff and other members, really just taking a look at the potential actions of the federal government and how New York State can respond. And that is one of the things that came out of it is a possible statewide OSHA recommendations or regulations if indeed the federal government goes to dismantle some of that. Also NLRB, what that looks like from a state perspective as employer versus regulator. So that was well received. We just want to put our experts out in front so folks can reach out. We offer the same for you if there are questions or particular topics. We're happy to connect you with the relevant faculty.
Another I'll just mention related for another thing from our ILR school, labor school, they're actually working with the governor's office and state agencies for the last few months. They've been training state government hiring people in how to hire the disabled because the state is short 10,000 jobs. They have 10,000 open state jobs and they have a hard time attracting people. And there are a lot of people who have a disability, one or more, who are very qualified to work for the state in various ways. And we have expertise in that at Cornell, and they've been actually helping the state comply with executive orders that this governor has put out. She's been very pro disability workers, disabled workers, and she did a couple of executive orders, basically setting up a new unit in her office to focus on this and get more people into the state workforce, and so and make it so they can do their jobs well. And we're directly helping them on that. Those are sort of our quick updates. Big picture, like I said, we're actually, bracing for cuts. I'll just tell you, my guess is they'll pass the state budget. It'll be balanced. They'll have to come back later in the year to change appropriations so that they can comply with the reduced federal funding and move money to spots where the feds have cut and the state feels it's imperative that they keep something going. That's my guess. I don't know how they would do the cutting or where it would be, but I think they would have to come back into session to deal with that in the fall. That's just my experience says that they'll do that, but who knows?
Wow. Thank you so much. I have Ryan and then Deborah.
Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Charlie said, I wholeheartedly agree with him. I think the timing of this will work out in such a way where they will pass the state budget and then they will do something very similar to what they did during the COVID pandemic, and they will come back and do an emergency appropriation, do a budget modification essentially, and move money around. Probably will have to dip into surplus. And of course, during that entire discussion, we will see what happens for counties. I will caution my greatest concern, and I've got goosebumps on my arm because I know what's coming with this. If that occurs, which I think there's a pretty high probability that that will be the case, you will see an onslaught from professional lobbyists and folks with an enormous amount of money will come into Albany and try and do all sorts of add-ons and modification. It will be short of chaos during that process. And we as an association representing all of you will need to stay in very close communication because there may be a situation where we have to activate the masses is what I call it. And you all remember our Medicaid campaign. Keep the cap. We might be coming back to something like that. So we'll keep you posted. But I totally agree with Charlie on the timing and the implementation. And I would also just echo the program that he had mentioned, the acronym for those large scale renewables projects is called, the governor's calling it the Sustainable Future Program.
Thank you. Great.
Ryan, I think whenever we did that campaign, that was my first and last tweet Twitter, whatever it's called, tweet.
It's a
Yes,
tweet.
it's a tweet.
It's an X
So-
now.
Yeah, whatever it is. Deborah?
Yeah, I have a very specific question, and I don't know if it's for Charlie or Ryan or both of you. We have an issue in the suburban areas in the northeastern part of Tompkins County who all have their wastewater treatment handled through the Cayuga Heights wastewater treatment plant, which doesn't have a lot of capacity right at the moment. And so, although we desperately need housing, particularly affordable housing, we have very limited sewer outlets available to us. And I'm wondering, because Cayuga Heights is a very small village, is there a funding stream that they could access or that the county could access on their behalf, because we have better capacity to handle grant funding, that would allow us to increase that sewer capacity so that we could build the housing we need?
I'm happy to take an initial stab, and then Charlie can piggyback if he wants. I would say, the best pot of money for them, Deborah, is the clean water funding. Now, I will also note that we are pushing very hard with the villages, cities, and towns to create what's called a SWAP program, Safe Water Action Program. Think of it like a CHIPS program for water, wastewater infrastructure. It would be direct bullet aid to the communities, get rid of the grant compliance process, and this village and this Cayuga Heights village would be able to access those funds. It's not in the budget right now. We're trying really hard to. I do think the clean water program would be something that they should take a look at, though.
Okay, thank you.
I'll steer you to the engineering planning grants at New York State Environmental Facilities Corp. What you described to me sounds like you need an engineering study to say, okay, is there some other system close enough that we can hook into and not, and not replace all of our pipes? Or do we have to do that? And that starts with, again, maybe the engineering's been done. It's possible that you know what the solution is, you just need the money. But if you haven't done that first level of work, I think they're up to like $25,000 grants. I think they're matched. Engineering planning grants, there's a cycle, and they do a lot of them, and a lot of those end up in becoming a real project. So you get a grant, you get an engineer in, they say this is the solution, this is what you need to do. You then apply for the big money through the same entity, EFC, and then they say, ooh, an engineering planning grant was done, this is what they need, confirmed, great, and then it becomes the scoring, like I said. Then it becomes, how many people, what's the median household income, grant, loan, et cetera, et cetera. So I would steer you there to do the initial engineering. If the engineering's already been done, then just go to EFC for the big funding.
The problem isn't the pipe system. The problem is the wastewater treatment facility itself. And we also have another issue because DEC controls our total maximum daily load. And then,
Yeah, very familiar with that. Yeah, so it's same process. If they conclude they'd have to increase the size of the plant, that would be, again, that would be money you could ask for, and then they would, of course, it would have to be factored into the TMDL. They might add some kind of another layer of a barrier, let's say, or diversion to prevent that from going into the lake. But again, that's all DEC and EFC are the sister agencies, so they would take all that into account. So so all done all the time. And just go to EFC and see where the money is, and what you need.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Jennifer, do you have any?
I have just some really brief updates.
Okay.
Thanks again for having us, inviting us to this very engaging meeting. Just a couple heads up, our annual economic snapshot is going to be coming out soon. So we'll make sure that you all get a copy of that, and you may be in some of the settings where we'll be sharing some of that information out. And then just a heads up, we are working with some partners. Each year we have an annual town gown conference where we invite local municipalities, planning partners, lots of, whatever appropriate local nonprofits and local partners based on the topic, and our peer communities from a broader region to gather in Ithaca. And this year we will be focusing on housing, which everyone is very aware is our single biggest issue, and many of our peer communities are having the same experience. So that's going to be on April 9th at the Ithaca Downtown Conference Center. But I just wanted to give you an early heads up. You should get an email within the week to at least help save the date if that's of interest to you. And yeah, we look forward to continuing to engage with you and your colleagues.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Any questions for Jennifer?
Oh, did Ryan leave?
Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Thanks for being here, and thanks for, or I guess it's nice to see you in a new capacity. The president made some pretty inflammatory comments, I believe, yesterday as it relates to the Gaza Strip. And just wondering if there's a sense of campus climate right now, and if that may be something that we see bubble up into, and rightfully so, into the community, and just kind of where those relations sit on campus, or what the climate currently is, if you could maybe touch on that briefly.
Sure, very briefly. I certainly, this is an issue that has continued to be, a tense issue from multiple perspectives, locally, nationally. Obviously, many folks are impacted by statements like that. As far as, so far today, haven't become aware of any particular situations, although, even in other settings this week, I heard and saw, people are still very engaged on this issue, right? So I guess I would just say I wouldn't be surprised to see some activity either on campus or out in the community, potentially on multiple aspects of that issue. We have an incredible team that monitors those situations, certainly that, again, while respecting people's free speech rights and opportunities to engage in political demonstrations, will also try to ensure everyone's safety, and that everyone has equal rights to share their views on things. So it's not as much in my direct wheelhouse, certainly. And yeah, I think we're just going to wait and watch, like many others, to see if that has any direct local impacts.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Mike Sigler?
I was just wondering, now that you're there, I will ask you this question, because I used to ask this question before. Whenever someone asks money of Cornell, I'm always told that, you just can't request money. Cornell, it just doesn't operate that way. It needs to be something more formal. Is there something that we can come up with that would be more of a formal way to do this? I'm going to give an example. Like the county, we talked about this, is we have to translate a lot of our stuff at the county into different languages. That's largely because of we are an international city, international county. And we would hope that maybe Cornell would like to chip into that. We can't just, I'm just not asking you right now, like, hey, can we have $75,000? There's got to be some type of system where as though we can request that of Cornell, and I don't know how to do that. And I didn't know if we could come up with something.
I think that's a very specific topic, an example that you've provided. I would just say that having a meeting to discuss what the goal is and what the need is, and us exploring whether we have ways that we can support with that, would be a way to get started. there are a lot of different relationships that we have with numerous community partners and nonprofit organizations, as you know, where we do provide funding and support in any number of ways. So I think it usually begins with a conversation and us identifying what the need is and what the opportunity to partner is, and if it is something we can help with or not. So I'd be happy to have a follow-up meeting with you on that particular topic. I imagine we have, tremendous resources and certainly appreciate that the county is providing that service.
No, yeah, that would be great because, well, it's like the school district is asking you for $10 million, and that's simply not the way they're going about it. I don't think that's going to happen. But there must be a way. I don't know what that way would be. So anyway, that's why I'm asking. So thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and it looks like Amy Kremenek had to run to another appointment, but let's see here. I just want to thank everyone that attended today, and our next meeting will be in May, and we'll send out, I'll make sure to contact everyone and let them know of the dates, as well as committee members. Please keep an eye out for emails asking for priorities, as well as if you're going to NISAC, so that we could set up some lobbying on your schedules. So thank you everyone for attending today. I hope this was helpful, and we do appreciate Charlie and Zoe and NISAC and Jennifer for sticking with us till the end. So thank you everyone. Have a great day.